Okay, so we're continuing on, sort of taking I wouldn't say it's a deep dive, but we're taking a dive into this subject of the one another's in the New Testament. And last week we looked at the primary one another, the first one another. That was our first look at one another's, and it's love one another. That is the overarching one another commandment in the New Testament. And I suggested that, in fact, all of the other one another's are simply facets of loving one another. And so we're gonna go on today, and that's why I'm calling this one Love One Another Part 2. And so one of the things we're going to look at today, I bet you never heard a sermon on this, but is foot washing.
Oh, grew up with that.
Did you?
Seventh-day Adventists.
Okay.
Quarterly.
I mentioned them.
The ordinance of humility.
Good. You'll be able to give us some maybe some insight on that. But in John 13:14, in the upper room, Thursday night, before he was arrested, Jesus commanded the disciples to follow his example and wash one another's feet. And it's really, you think, the context of this. This is the last things Jesus is going to give to his disciples. So it's not small talk. He's not just killing time. He's telling them the main things that he wants them to understand. And so he goes through this almost like a living parable, where at a certain point in the meal, he gets up, probably toward the very beginning of the meal, and gets a basin and a towel, strips down to his undies, and goes around and washes the dirty, filthy feet of every one of his disciples, including Judas. That's important to remember. But what is really interesting, given that, this is the same context where he does the Lord's Supper, where he institutes, the taking the cup and taking the bread. This is also really important. And we hear all about that later on in the New Testament. You never hear the subject of foot washing ever mentioned again in the New Testament. There's no reference to it. There's no example of it being practiced. And I go, why? I mean, it wouldn't be that complicated a thing to do, right? I mean, you could do it, but it's not. And in fact, as you go out, look through church history, it is actually even rarely mentioned throughout church history. And there are, relatively speaking, only a few churches that practice it today. And most of them, if they do practice it, it's only on special occasions. It's not on a regular, like weekly or monthly basis. So here's some of the ones. The first one, Seventh-day Adventist. So they do it quarterly, right?
Quarterly.
Okay. Is this for the whole congregation? Uh-huh. And they do it in their Saturday service?
It's incorporated into the Lord's Supper, which they do quarterly. You do the foot washing, ordinance of humility. The men go to one area of the church, the women go to another. We go through washing each other's feet with the basins and the warm water and the towel, and then we come back together and have communion together.
Okay. I didn't know
It's
that.
I missed it when I left that
Yeah.
church in my 20s. I missed that. It's very intimate. You always pick who you're going to go with.
Yeah.
But still.
Also, Mennonites practice it. I don't know how I know the neighborhood doesn't do it. They're Mennonite. Brethren groups, old regular Baptists. I'm not sure what old regular Baptists are. Anyway, those are the groups. So you're not going to see it in Presbyterian churches and more mainline Baptist churches. Yeah. Now Catholics, Anglicans, and Episcopalians and Lutherans and Methodists, they do it once a year on what's called Maundy Thursday, which is Holy Week, the Thursday when Jesus would have instituted this. So it's, relatively speaking, in the whole spectrum of the church, it's not really a widespread practice. So the question is, because Jesus made a big deal about this, how are we supposed to practice this? Literally, or is it, or figuratively? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that, in a little bit about that. But first, before we get to that, what we're really looking at in these one another's is the question, how are we to love one another? And like most things, we start with our thinking. It starts in our minds. How do we think of ourselves in relationship to others? That's the question where we start with all of the one another's. Romans 12:2, that's the key verse. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And that word for renewing in the Greek is the word that we get metamorphosis from. Metamorphosis is, that's when the caterpillar, is in the cocoon and goes from being this ugly little larvae thing and turns into this incredible, colorful, bright animal. That's metamorphosis. That's God's nature parable to us, for sure, that's what we are like, and that he wants to create in us as a new creation. So you can think about that. So you can think about yourself, because this is an incredible thing when he says that be renewed by the renewing of your mind through this whole metamorphosis thing. It means we can change. We can change. We are not stuck with our, I'd say, personality. So you may say, well, I'm on the shy side. I'm more introverted. Well, you can change. You may be more on the boisterous, outgoing, extroverted side of things, where you can wear people out. And you can change. You're not stuck. That's the incredible thing that God is telling us here. You can morph. And the change starts in your mind. It starts in your mind, your attitude, your thoughts. So with that, let's go and let's look at this, washing one another's feet. So John 13:14 is the verse where he says, if I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. So the first thing we have to think about is, what did foot washing mean in that culture of Jesus' day? Okay, back then, guess what? They didn't have paved sidewalks. They didn't have paved roads. Anywhere you walked, you're walking on dirt. You're walking on a dusty trail. And the common footwear was, sandals. I don't think they had Birkenstocks yet, but that was sandals was a common kind of footwear. And so people's feet, after a day of being outside and working, are going to be pretty dirty, pretty dusty. And so you come home you had some options. Either you wash your own feet, or you have somebody else wash your feet for you. So in a family, the father comes home, who's going to wash his feet? Maybe the wife, maybe the children.
They had servants to do that.
And if you had a servant, if you were in a position where you did have a servant or a slave, they would wash your feet. But guess who didn't wash your feet? Anybody who was socially above you in that society. They did not wash your feet. That was understood. That was the way things were. So if that was to happen, that would be so humiliating to the person doing it. So here when you see Jesus, who is, and we just went through some of the names of Jesus, he's the Master, he's the Lord, he's the Messiah, the Son of God. This is what they knew of him. They didn't know the full spectrum of who he was. King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the one who's going to raise from the dead, who's going to be seated at the right hand of the Father. But that's who he is. Gets down, totally shatters the cultural norm in a very shocking way and washes their feet. That's why Peter said, "You will not wash my feet." That was totally unacceptable. That's reversing the roles. That's why John the Baptist said, "I'm not even worthy to get down and untie his sandals." But Jesus took the role of a slave. And he had already told them that the Son of Man did not come to be served, to get his feet washed, but to serve, to wash feet. That's why he came. They had heard those words, but in their minds, those are just words. And now they are seeing this fleshed out in a shocking way. Ooh, is that what he meant when he said that? They were scandalized by this. This was something that should not be. And then he tells them, you do the same thing for one another.
Ooh.
That's where the rubber meets the road now.
That's the rub.
And they're like, because what did these guys were known for? How many times had Jesus had to step in because they were arguing about what? Who is the greatest? Who's going to wash my feet? Who's going to get their feet washed? So what he's telling them, they have to be a slave to one another. Now, how does that fit in with the mind? Well, that's the attitude they need to develop as they think of one another, think of others, is that my relationship to you, I am the servant. You're not my servant, I am your servant. But you, conversely, are mine. But I can't hold that to you. I can't demand that of you. Because all of this is your choice, your will. So we can't use this as a hammer to go, well, you're supposed to be a servant. You're supposed to wash my feet. Yeah, but you're supposed to wash my feet, and we're all on the same level. That was what was so radically different to introduce into that culture at that time. This was no longer for the disciples just a theoretical thing, words that Jesus said. No, this was now flesh. This was now very practically to be lived out. So I'll give you an example. This is how it won't seem so shocking or anything like that, but you all know we had a flood on Thanksgiving. And, you're in Orlando, your house is flooding. What do? So we called our kids on Thanksgiving Day, Jared and Anna. And they didn't say, oh yeah, well, we'll check it out tomorrow. They got in their car and came over and worked really hard. You know, besides just shutting the water off, they could have just gone over and shut the water off. They went in, got our sopping wet, soaked carpet out of the room, hauled that out, which was yeah, which was an ugly mess.
They had to cut it and everything after they got.
But they not only that, they went out of their way to track down, call you guys, and get a shop vac to get the water out and get fans to do. So they went way out and above and beyond. They served us. They washed our feet. I mean, they could have, you know, said, yeah, you know, well, we'll check it out tomorrow. I'll go shut the water off and then we'll come back, you know, and while in the meantime, the water that's standing there is soaking up the wall. Because he knew, and so we felt so just loved on, you know, so much by our kids. I mean, it's like our respect for them goes way up. So that's an example in real life. And you guys, you know, we could talk about a lot of examples. I'm sure we all experience that. That was kind of a big thing for us at the moment, but it's just in the little things. It's just in the little things. So if you have that attitude, and of course I qualify all this is that I'm learning this. I mean, this is, you know, reinforcing what in my mind is more theoretical maybe than actuality. But that's why we get married, so we can serve one. We're going to talk about that. That's why we have kids, because that's where you really learn this stuff. Okay, so the first is washing one another's feet. That's how we love one another. That's how we are to think. And in that process, our minds are renewed and we experience metamorphosis. We're becoming the butterfly. Well then, 1 Peter 5:5 says, to humble yourselves toward one another. Actually, this is the verse. All of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another. For God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So I just clothe yourself with humility. You know, your shirt, your pants, your skirt, your blouse, you know, the hat, you know, your shoes. Those are your spiritual humility clothes. Now, and the thing is why I say this is, you know, in our minds, because we tend to dress, I believe most people tend to dress according to how they view themselves, how they think about themselves, about who they are as a person. You dress what makes you comfortable. So I'm not comfortable wearing a suit and a tie. so you don't, some people are. You know, farmers tend to dress like farmers, right? And cowboys tend to dress like cowboys, or people who want to be a cowboy will dress like a cowboy. You know, rappers dress like rappers, and bankers dress like bankers, and doctors dress like doctors, and so on. So how are we to view ourselves? Well, Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4 is a verse that really kind of sums this whole thing up. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind. Again, see, it starts with the mind. Humility of mind, how you think of yourself in relationship to others. Regard one another as more important than yourselves. That's saying, I'm in the servant role, I'm serving you. You're more important in that sense. Are they really more important? No, I mean, we could say everybody's equal, and we can use that like I said, we can use that like a weapon to say, well, you've got to do this, you know. No, it's me. I put myself in that position. Just as Jesus, who was far above, more important than anybody else, put himself in the position of being the least important. You know, when he died on the cross, He died as a common criminal. And in Roman society, if you were crucified, that means you were the big loser. I mean, you were the lowest of the low. And Jesus allowed himself to be put in that position for us. And that's the attitude that we're to have. So he says, do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interest of others. And so humility is to be our spiritual wardrobe in the way we relate to other people. So we see, how are we to think of ourselves in relation to others? We're to think of ourselves as a servant, foot washer. We're to think of ourselves with humility, to dress ourselves with humility, to see others as more important than ourselves, and we're the servant. And then this is a really interesting one. Submit to one another. Oh, that's the one we really love, that one. Submit to one another. Ephesians 5:21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Really key. Here's where, we talk about context. Context is really super critical, important. So that verse, submit yourself to one another out of reverence for Christ, comes it's like the heading, it's like the thesis statement of all the verses that follow. What are the verses that follow? Wives, submit yourselves to your husband. Husbands, love your wives. Children, obey your parents. Fathers, don't provoke your children. Slaves, submit to your masters. Masters, treat them that you have a master. You know what he's saying? All of those, submit to one another. Mm-hmm. He's saying that. That's because that's the controlling verse. Submit yourself to one another out of reverence for Christ. We so often, we look at that and we go, okay, wives, they got to submit, but husbands get to love. They're not told to submit. They don't have to submit, but they're supposed to love their wives how?
Like Christ loved the church.
Like Christ. How did Christ love the church? Well, go to John chapter 13, verse 14. What did he do? He got down and washed their feet. He acted like a servant.
Don't talk about that part very much.
No, we don't.
No.
He submitted. And so how are husbands to love their wives?
Through submission.
Through submission. And it's the same all the way through. And what he's saying, because you notice he goes back and forth with each of these relationships. Wives, husbands, husbands, wives. Children, parents, parents, children. Slaves, masters, masters, slave. So nobody gets an out on having to submit.
To one another.
That is to be, again, like the others, is to be a dominating mindset of being in this, seeing ourselves in this role of the submissive one, of the servant, of the slave. No one gets a pass on it. Now, that doesn't mean we view ourselves as doormats. Everybody will bring that up. They'll throw that one right up. Well, you can't just be a doormat. No, he's not. This is willing, voluntary. When Jesus said, somebody makes you go 2 miles, go 1 mile, go 2. That's on you. That's voluntary. In fact, now it puts you in more of a controlling role because,
Controlling yourself.
yes, exactly. So we have washing one another's feet as be a servant, humility, clothing ourselves in humility, submitting to one another. And then Romans 12:10, honor one another, honor one another above yourself. So again, we're back at the same place. So why do we honor? Why do you honor someone? How do we honor someone? Well, just think of the Olympics right now. The ones who achieve the highest scores or do the best in their event are going to get honored, right? They're going to get the gold, the silver, the bronze. They do something special. They're special. They get honored. And but we are to honor one another above. So how are we supposed to see one another and think about one another? There's something really special about that person. Something that is deserving of my honoring them. That song I sing, everyone is a universe. Everyone has a history, has things about them, experiences, gifts that they possess that are unique to them. And for that, we are to honor them. Besides just basic, we can say we should honor them because they're created in God's image. They reflect the Creator. It may be marred, it may be, hard to see, it may be like a really dirty window you got to brush off, but we got to honor them for that. We should honor them because Jesus honored them by dying on the cross for them and inviting them to be part of his kingdom and part of his family. We should honor people just for that basis, much less the personal special attributes that they possess, and everybody does. Alicia she's got gifts that we know nothing about. I mean, and like I told Marin once, someday she's going to meet this girl, and this girl is going to, she's going to walk and she says, "Thank you, Mom, so much for what you did for me." And that's the hope. That's what you keep out there. And we have to think that way toward, and it's that C.S. Lewis picture. He says, if we saw a person today as they will be in heaven, we would be tempted to fall down and worship them. In the book of Daniel says we're all going to shine like stars. So, honor one another. So that takes a metamorphosis in our minds, because our human nature is so self-oriented and so locked in on ourselves. And when you think about envy, you think about jealousy, and all, those are just totally opposite and counter of this. And we're in the shallow end on this stuff still. We're taking a dive, but we're in the shallow end. So, yeah, that's it for today.
Good for you. Wow.
Yeah, I need to do this study. But I'm God, and God, he just has taken pity on me, and he gave me Debbie, She is so easy, so easy, and she's a servant, yeah. And always remember, being a servant is one thing. It's when somebody treats you like a servant. That's another thing. That's a challenge.